Well, I finally passed 200 episodes, so I figured it was about time I updated my best and worst movies list. I figure you probably want to see the worst movies list first, although not as many changes to this one as I thought there was going to be. I guess I must have concentrated more on good movies these past couple of years than really shitty ones, but there are a few new ones, so I figured this list was worth updating. Now, if you haven't seen my previous worst movies list, the way I'm judging these isn't necessarily based on how technically bad the movies are, although a lot of them are very technically bad. Instead, it's more based on how entertaining they are. So a lot of movies like Star Crash or Challenge of the Tiger, Miami Connection, those are not going to be on here because those are the kind of movies where you can get together with some friends and have a bad movie night and you can have some fun. They're actually funny and entertaining. Instead, the movies I'm going to talk about here are just boring. They're tedious, nothing really happens, they're a chore to get through, or they're painful. Like they're the kind of movies that just make you cringe watching them. And the top ones on this list are going to be a combination of both those things. So now that you know how I'm judging these movies, here is the worst movies I've reviewed, 200th episode edition.
Here's a show I think you'll enjoy.
Number 10, Rat Fink Ah Boo Boo. You know you're in trouble when a movie can't even get its fucking title right. I think one of the ways I describe this movie is it's like if there was a Turkish knockoff of the Adam West Batman series, but I think if there was a Turkish ripoff of the Adam West Batman, it would be more entertaining than this movie. Now, supposedly this was originally supposed to be a serious crime drama, but then halfway through the filmmakers said, you know what, this isn't really working, so fuck it, let's just make a Batman parody. Which probably explains why the two guys don't become superheroes until over halfway through, but from dusk till dawn, this ain't. The biggest problem with this movie is that it feels like it shouldn't be feature length. So there's a lot of scenes that are padded out with just endless shots of people walking. Like there's one part where the bad guys are following a girl as she goes to get groceries, but instead of being suspenseful, it's just shot after shot of people's feet. Even Quentin Tarantino would say there's too many feet shots in this movie. There's also a scene where the bad guys are just sitting around on couches not doing anything, and one of them even gets up and says like, hey, come on, this is boring, we're not doing anything, we should do something, are we gonna do something? Let's do something. And there's way too much of that in this movie. Things pick up a little bit once they become superheroes, but even then it's just, there's a badly choreographed fight scene, and then they run to another location, and then they have another badly choreographed fight scene. At the end, there's a gorilla and some guy dressed like Alex from A Clockwork Orange for some reason. My best guess is that somebody had a gorilla costume and they figured, might as well use it. So yeah, this feels like something that might have worked as a short, but as a feature length, you can just tell that they're stretching it out way too much. One thing I will say, some of the music in this movie is actually pretty catchy, especially like the title like Rat Fink song.
I got the word for you because it's what you is. You is a rat fink. You is a rat fink.
So that's probably why this is only number 10, but otherwise, yeah, it's pretty bad.
Here's a show I think you'll enjoy.
Number 9, Ape. Okay, this is one that I've talked about a lot on my other worst movies list, so I'll try not to repeat myself too much here. I've done a lot of rip-offs and cash-ins of popular movies on my show over the years, but out of all the ones I've done, I think this is probably the laziest. Everything about this movie just screams cheap. It's like a bunch of people said, okay, the King Kong remake's coming out this year. How can we make a movie as quickly and easily as possible that can maybe trick some people out of some money? Probably the biggest example of this is the ape costume, which I don't even think they made for this movie. I think they probably rented it from a store and returned it the same day so they wouldn't have to pay extra. And it seems like some stuff is in there just so they'd have some cool stuff to put on the poster. So like Jaws was popular, so just have them splash around with a dead shark for 30 seconds. That way we can put a shark on the poster. You know what? We should probably have a snake on the poster too. So just have him grab a garter snake and throw it. Oh, what? It hit the camera? Okay, well, we can't do another take, so just put it in the movie. I refuse to believe they did more than one take for anything in this piece of shit. Just, it's so lazy on every level. Even the 3D stuff feels like an afterthought. It's mostly just shots of Korean extras trying and failing not to smile and look at the camera as they shoot their little fake rifles to get the 3D effect. Some people would probably say this is like the 70s version of one of those Asylum ripoffs, but I think that's actually an insult to the Asylum. At least the Asylum would get somebody like Lorenzo Lamas or somebody to be in their movie. Now this does have the mom from Growing Pains in it, but this was before she was on Growing Pains. If it was an Asylum movie, it would be after she was on Growing Pains. Now believe it or not, this is not the worst King Kong ripoff I've ever done on my show. There's another one that I'm going to get to later, but it's still pretty bad. I'd say if you want to watch a King Kong knockoff that's entertaining, just go for Mighty Peking Man. That one's cheesy, but it's still way easier to sit through than this one.
Here's a show I think you'll enjoy.
Number 8. The Shape of Things to Come. Now, this one is a little hard to explain why it's among the worst of the worst, because on a technical level, it's slightly more well-made than some of the other movies on this list. It's got some well-known actors in it, like Jack Palance, even though he's clearly slumming in this movie. But there's something almost magical about the way all the individual elements come together to make one just big souffle of shit. For starters, it has basically nothing to do with the H.G. Wells book it's named after. Instead, it's just another Star Wars cash-in because, hey, it's the late 70s. Every country's got to make one, so why should Canada be any different? You've got the cute little robot that's trying to be like R2-D2. Jack Palance is like a pseudo Darth Vader type who's trying to take over the universe with an army of robots, although even the Trade Federation would say these robots are lame. And again, like so many movies on this list, it commits the ultimate sin of being boring as fuck. For starters, there's not even any space battles in this movie. How do you make a Star Wars knockoff and not have any space battles? Star Crash had space battles. Star Crash had a lot of space battles. They were cheesy space battles, but they were still there. In this one, there's even a part where the good guys are making their way to a planet and there's a bad guy ship coming towards them. And they're saying, we should do something. And they go, well, we don't have any weapons, so we can't do anything. And then they don't do anything. That's the kind of movie you're dealing with here. Remember in Star Wars where instead of attacking the Death Star, they just said, well, there's nothing we could do, and then they just did nothing? That was exciting, wasn't it? So yeah, to give you the big difference between why something like Star Crash is better, Star Crash is cheesier than this movie. It's more ridiculous. But the fact that it's more ridiculous is what makes it more entertaining. This one is just boring bad. It's not even funny bad. The exception being when Jack Palance gets hit on the head by a piece of the set because you can tell that that wasn't supposed to happen. So that part's pretty entertaining, but for the most part, it's just dull. And of course, it's Canadian. Of course, the Canadian Star Wars ripoff has to be the boring one. Oh well, at least we had David Cronenberg making movies in the 70s.
Here's a show I think you'll enjoy.
Number 7. The Story of Chinese Gods. Now this is the only animated movie on the list. I think in one of my previous ones, Korean Tron was on there too, but that got edged out by the other movies on this one. This one has a lot in common with Korean Tron. It has the same cut rate animation. A lot of the voice actors either sound bored out of their minds or like they're trying to make the most annoying cartoon voice possible. And even though more stuff happens in this movie, I don't know, something about this one just rubbed me the wrong way. It's very hard to explain, but there's a bunch of just weird shit in this movie, but instead of being trippy, it's just obnoxious. It's just loud, annoying shit just constantly coming at you. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. Half the time, it's annoying shit constantly coming at you, and then the other half, it's boring, with voice actors who just sounded like they swallowed a bag of Quaaludes before they read their lines. A lot of the animated movies I've done in this show were weird, but they at least have some sort of coherence to them. This one was just a giant pile of nonsense. I don't even remember what the fucking story of this movie was. Like, Bruce Lee is in there for some reason, and they have baby Chun-Li riding the flying Nimbus from Dragon Ball Z. This whole movie is just a big reminder of better things you could be doing. You could be playing Street Fighter 2, you could be watching Dragon Ball, you could be watching any Bruce Lee movie. Even Game of Death is more respectful of Bruce Lee's memory than this movie is. And even among Bruceploitation movies, this is bad because Challenge of the Tiger is way better. Challenge of the Tiger had a guy karate chopping a bull to death in a topless tennis match in it. This movie doesn't have any of that shit. So, yeah, watch Challenge of the Tiger and not this one. Or watch any Bruce Lee movie. Or watch any of the other animated movies I've done, except maybe Korean Tron, because even though it's not on here, it's still pretty bad.
Here's a show I think you'll enjoy.
Number 6. Creepshow 3. Wow. Talk about a horror movie series going from great to just bullshit in a couple of movies. Now, supposedly George Romero sold the rights to make a Creepshow movie to this couple that he knew, I guess, as a favor, but I don't know if they had dirt on him and blackmailed him into giving them the Creepshow rights, because I can't imagine George Romero having any confidence in these two being able to make a good movie if this is the result. The first Creepshow was like an almost perfect homage to the 1950s horror comics like Tales from the Crypt. It captured the look and feel of those comics just about as well as anybody could have hoped. Second movie, not as good, but it was at least a movie. The third one it feels like a cheap TV movie just with gore. Like, it almost looks like one of those Disney Channel films like High School Musical, except there's blood in it. And I will say the whole idea of having the individual story segments be connected and all in one setting is actually not a bad idea. That could have been a good way to set this apart from the previous Creepshow movies and make its own identity. But the thing is, a good idea doesn't mean much if it's not executed well, and boy oh boy is it not executed well here. All the attempts at humor fall flat. A lot of the effects and gore are either just obviously fake rubbery monsters or Adobe After Effects CGI. And the story ideas are just lame. Like, there's the one where the guy kills a homeless man and then his ghost comes after him by offering him a hot dog. Like, what the fuck? The only idea that's sorta decent is the one where the hooker kills the guy and then he comes back as like a vampire or monster or whatever. But again, it's done really badly, and the ending, it just sort of stops. It doesn't really end. It just kind of like, okay, we're done with this segment, on to the next one. And maybe there's a couple examples of a series going downhill that are worse than this one, but just the difference between the first Creepshow and this piece of shit is massive. Like, this doesn't deserve to have the Creepshow name on it. I agree with a lot of other people saying that Tales from the Dark Side is the real Creepshow 3. Now, one thing I can say is that there's a new Creepshow series on Shudder. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm really hoping it helps revive and rehabilitate the Creepshow name, because it really needs it after Creepshow 3. I really hope the Creepshow series on Shudder is good, because the Creepshow name deserves way better than this movie. And you know what? It shouldn't have even been named Creepshow in the first place. I stand by what I said earlier. I think that couple blackmailed George Romero. I don't know what they had on him, but it must have been bad.
Here's a show I think you'll enjoy.
Number 5, Bigfoot. Alright, this is another golden oldie from my previous 2 worst movies list, so again, I'll try not to repeat myself too much here. When I say that the worst thing a movie can be is boring, this is one of the best examples of that. Almost nothing happens in this movie, and it's one of those movies that promises way more than it delivers. The poster says breeds with anything, which would lead you to believe that this is going to be some really sleazy drive-in movie, which could be kind of fun, and instead it's just tame. I think this would probably qualify for a G rating nowadays, or, well, maybe a PG. For some reason, all the recent kids movies are PG. I don't know why. This definitely isn't a Wizards PG, I can tell you that. This is yet another movie that commits the sin of padding out the runtime by showing people walk, or showing people driving. Oh, your movie's not long enough? Here, just put in another driving scene. That'll get this to an hour and a half. A much better example of a super low-budget, cheesy Bigfoot movie that actually does deliver on some sleaze is Night of the Demon. Night of the Demon has some boring parts too, but it at least balances those out with some slasher movie-style kills. Imagine if they just took the boring scenes from Night of the Demon and made that the whole movie, and that's basically Bigfoot. Alright, I've already talked about this on my previous 2 worst movies list, so there's really not much else I can say here. All you gotta know is it's boring. It's basically it. So, next movie.
Here's a show I think you'll enjoy.
Number 4, Things. Yeah, you knew this was gonna be on the list, didn't you? Although I'll bet you some of you are probably pretty surprised to see it's only number 4. That should probably tell you something about what the rest of the list is going to be like. This one is probably the most amateurish movie on this entire list. This is a movie whose production values make the Turkish ripoffs look like a Star Wars movie. Like a real Star Wars movie, not Turkish Star Wars. I said this in the video, but this really seems like when I was a kid and I had a camcorder and I'd get together with my friends and we'd make like fake horror movies. The main difference is we were kids, the guys who made this are adults, and our movies were only a few minutes, not an hour and a half. And you know what that means? That means there's a shitload of padding in this movie. The main difference is that instead of showing him walk, it's mainly just guys sitting around doing nothing, just guys just drinking beer and talking about bullshit. And this isn't helped by the soundtrack, which is either that really droning keyboard music that sounds like they pressed the demo button on a Casio, or they just don't have any music at all. Like, there's one part where the guys go around searching the house that lasts for a few minutes, and it's basically completely silent. There's no dialogue, there's no music, there's no sound effects. It's just two idiots opening doors for a couple of minutes. Again, if this had been a short, this could have gotten a reputation as like a so bad it's good kind of movie. Because you basically have just a couple of Canadian shitheads who decided to make a movie about their house getting invaded by turd ants or whatever. And if it had only been 15 minutes, might have been kind of funny. But there's way too many boring parts in this movie. Supposedly the budget for this was like 30 grand. I'm guessing most of that went to getting Amber Lynn to appear in this. And even then, I still have no idea how they got her to agree to be in this movie. When you're baffled as to how a porn star is in a movie, that's how you know something's bad. Amber Lynn's scenes have basically nothing to do with what else is going on. She's in it's supposed to be a newsroom, but it looks like a high school AV classroom, giving out news reports that have nothing to do with the main plot. So that leads me to believe that she wasn't originally supposed to be in this movie, and then somehow they got her to agree to be in it, and then just wrote a part in a couple minutes like, oh, we'll shoot this in an afternoon. The only way I can think of that they got her to be in this is that there was probably some porn convention in whatever town these guys are from, and they just walked up to her and said like, hey Amber, we're making a fucking movie, eh? You want to be in it? You know, we don't have much money, but we'll get you some beers, and I got a buddy that can get you some coke if you want it. That is the only way I can think of that they got her to agree to be in this movie, because yeah, the whole thing seems like a glorified home movie that got stretched out to 90 minutes, even though it definitely shouldn't have been. This has gotten a reputation as kind of a so bad it's good movie. I can kind of see why. There are a couple of funny parts in it just based on how inept the whole thing is. But like I said though, way too much filler and way too much annoying parts. And it's Canadian. So again, my home country has something else to be proud of. In fact, in a lot of ways, this might be the most Canadian horror movie ever made. If you ever want to know what it's like to just hang out with a couple of shitheads in a trailer drinking Molson's, that's kind of this movie, just with turd ants.
Here's a show I think you'll enjoy.
Number 3, Queen Kong. I think part of the reason why this one is so high on the list is that there are few things more painful to sit through than a bad comedy. And this one is pretty fucking bad. All the jokes are either super obvious and lowest common denominator, or they're just so weird that they don't make any sense. Probably the best example of that is where they're walking through the jungle and they find a prehistoric bagpipe, and then they make a "you'll take the high road, I'll take the low road" joke. Like, what the fuck? And again, just like with Ape, a lot of the references are just super obvious attempts at trying to cash in other movies. It's like those Seltzer-Friedberg, like epic movie or disaster movie, those kind of things. Lots of really obvious references where the joke itself is just the reference. Like there's a part where they're on the boat and there's these girls dancing and the guy goes, "They seem possessed," and then their heads turn around because, you know, The Exorcist was popular. And then there's a part where like they see a shark and it's got lipstick on and it says Lady Jaws. No setup for it. They just look and it's there because, you know, Jaws was popular too. Better put a Jaws reference in there, and we're already doing Queen Kong, so let's have it be Lady Jaws. Even on an effects level, like usually for a parody or a comedy, the effects don't have to be good. Like it can be funnier if they're bad, but even here, they're just bad. They're not funny bad. The T-Rex monster looks like it's made out of paper mache, and there's a pterodactyl thing that has a hook for one of its legs. They never explain why. Even if this is technically more well-made than Ape, which really isn't saying a whole lot, this one annoyed me a lot more than Ape. Ape was boring. This one was boring and painful. Like when you're sitting through a comedy and all the jokes just fall super flat, it is fucking painful to sit through. And one of the worst things about this is that I have 2 King Kong knockoffs on this list, and it was for the 1976 version of King Kong, which already isn't a very good movie. Like, at least with these other knockoffs, it's for stuff like Star Wars or Alien or The Terminator or actual good movies. This many people tried to cash in on the Dino De Laurentiis King Kong, and like, Jesus Christ, was it worth it? So yeah, this is the last King Kong knockoff on this list. Apparently there's another one called Mighty Gorga, which is supposed to be really bad, like one of the worst movies ever made. Haven't done that one yet, but if I ever do, I guess we'll see how it stacks up against these other ones, but it would have to be pretty bad to be worse than this one.
Here's a show I think you'll enjoy.
Number 2. Star Crash 2, or Escape from Galaxy 3, or Morons from Outer Space 4, or whatever the fuck this piece of shit is called. That's right, this movie isn't number 1 anymore. The king is dead. I bet you're all probably curious as to what the new number 1 is now. Again, this is another one that I've talked about a bunch before. All I'll say is that this movie is a great example of being really, really boring and really, really stupid at the same time. They're constantly padding out the runtime again. The biggest example of this is where they have the 2-minute shot of them running back up to the spaceship and they show the whole thing. They even do it twice. They show them coming out of the spaceship and going back to the spaceship, so that 4 minutes was really essential. Thanks, movie. And the whole thing has a real cobbled together feel to it. They have the effects from the first Star Crash, which is actually the real Star Crash, since this isn't a real sequel. The village that the heroes go to was probably from another movie. I don't know that for sure. I just got that feeling. The costumes were probably all from something else. And I think some director in Italy was just like, yeah, we can use these. I can knock out a movie in a weekend. Sure. This is a movie that has almost nothing going for it. There's basically no action other than the stock footage from the first Star Crash, so I'm not counting that. There's nothing funny about it, either intentionally or unintentionally. Also, one of the alternate titles is, I think, like Erotic Games in the Third Dimension or Third Galaxy or something like that, implying that it's going to be some sexy softcore movie. Even there, it's disappointing. Like, I think we see the main actress go skinny dipping under a waterfall for a few seconds. That's pretty much it. I think the opening credits to Barbarella had more skin than this movie does. This is also another one where it seems like this could have been a so bad it's good, or at least so bad it's funny kind of movie. Like, you have the bad guy who's dressed up like George Clinton, looking like he's looking for the mothership connection. But he doesn't really do anything. He basically just spends the whole movie staring into an orb, yelling that he can't find the heroes. I don't think he ever actually interacts with the main characters through the whole thing. Again, I'm guessing they probably shot all of that guy's scenes in one day. He was like a friend of the director, and he said, like, okay, just wear this costume. Yeah, I know it's stupid, but, you know, we'll give you a couple of bucks. We'll shoot it in one afternoon. It'll be easy. So yeah, because it's technically not official, I guess you could say Creepshow 3 is a worse sequel since it's actually supposed to be Creepshow 3. But I still say stick with the original because this movie makes the first Star Crash look like Empire Strikes Back. And I guess this one would be The Phantom Menace, maybe. I don't know.
Here's a show I think you'll enjoy.
And number 1, War of the Robots. Ooh boy. I did not think it was possible to make Star Crash 2 look good, and it still doesn't look good, but it's definitely better than this movie. This is easily the most inept Star Wars cash-in I've ever seen. Now, the guy who directed this also made a bunch of other movies that apparently use a lot of the same effects and sets and costumes and stuff. I haven't seen any of them, and after seeing this one, I don't want to, but apparently they're basically like the same movie, just with different elements rearranged. I have no idea if this is considered the best one of those movies or the worst one or whatever, but either way, holy shit was this painful. This makes Star Crash 2 look like intelligent sci-fi. You've got the robots of the title, which are just guys painted gold with Prince Valiant haircuts. And even more than Star Crash 2, this finds that golden combination of being boring as shit and just obnoxious and annoying. The biggest example of that is the final space battle. It's 20 minutes long, and it's the same 6 shots repeated over and over and over. And to give you a comparison, the attack on the Death Star in the first Star Wars, 10 minutes. This one, twice as long. I guess they were so proud of their effects, they wanted to show them off, even if they were the same effects over and over again. Words can't describe how tedious it was getting through this thing, especially that last space battle. I had no idea an action sequence could be this hard to get through. It's the same shitty effects, the same shots, the same video game Atari Space Invader sound effects over and over again. And then occasionally they're interrupted by some guys in a cockpit going like, I can't shake him, or something to that effect. You have no idea who's winning. You have no idea who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. Some guys blow up. Were they important? Who knows? And as this goes on, it almost becomes this bizarre form of Chinese water torture. Like, you know what it is? It's like somebody going like this to you for 20 minutes over and over and over again. Oh yeah, you like that? You like that? Well, guess what? There's still 15 minutes of this fucking thing left. I almost don't want to go on too much longer about this one because it's just going to be me repeating that every scene, every line, every plot development is just the stupidest shit ever. This was the closest I've ever come to bailing on a video. I got about halfway through this thing and thought, oh my god, I don't know if I can finish this. But you know what? For the good of the show and for your entertainment, I did. So I hope you really appreciate what I do for you people. So yeah, we've got a new number one, and I personally hope this stays number one forever because I really don't want to watch a movie that's worse than this one. And this is one of my least popular videos, so I guess you guys must have agreed with me. You must have had a hard time getting through this one too. Oh well, on the plus side, I guess this means I won't have to watch any of the other movies this guy made, because apparently you guys don't want to see him either. And I don't blame you. So yeah, there you go. We've got a new reigning champion of shit, War of the Robots. And to anyone who might have thought of checking this thing out, stay the fuck away from it. So there you go. That's the new worst movies I've ever reviewed list. Like I said, not a lot of changes, but it does have a new number one, so I figured it was worth updating. I'm going to get to work on the new best movies list, and that one actually does have a lot of changes. I'm going to be curious to see what people think is on that list and what isn't. So, yeah, I'm going to get to work on that, and until next time.